development partners. You will further recall that the Agreement for National Unity represented a solemn commitment by both parties to prioritize national stability, democratic integrity, and peaceful coexistence over partisan interests. It was widely welcomed across the sub-region and in the country as a mature and responsible pathway toward the escalation of tension and institutional reform. To address the impasse surrounding the rigged 2023 elections, the Resolution 3 of the Agreement for National Unity set up the tripartite committee to review the 2023 elections and previous elections with a view to make recommendations that will be actionable and implementable. The tripartite committee comprised representatives from the APC, the SLPP-led government, and development partners. The committee worked for a period of 6 months tirelessly and presented its report with more than 80 recommendations on 1st July 2024. In addition to the 80 joint recommendations, each party to the process, that is APC and the government, produced divergent reports on matters that couldn't be mutually agreed upon. This is principally the refusal of the ECSL to produce and publish the disaggregated election result, for which the APC staged a walkout of the tripartite committee on 2 occasions. Consequently, with the intervention of moral guarantors, both the APC and the government produced divergent reports and recommendations touching on areas of disagreement, including elections, results, and our opinions about the commissioners of the ECSL who conducted the widely discredited elections. These, the APC called for their removal from office. And when we say commissioners, we're not talking about only the chief electoral commissioners, we're talking about all the commissioners. Now let's get to the current situation, having given you the background. Let's get to the current situation. The Agreement for National Unity. 29 months since the Agreement for National Unity was concluded, we still have politically motivated cases in court. Files on cases against APC officials have gone missing in court. There is a disproportionate distribution of responsibilities in Parliament, contrary to rules, and the re-engineering and rekindling of relationship to improve the political ecosystem has collapsed, which defeats the purpose of Resolution 6. Neither the presidency nor the government chief negotiator respond to correspondences from the APC. The state continues to use law enforcement agencies to intimidate political opponents, including ordinary citizens such as Okada and Keke riders. In summary, the purpose of building democracy and the consolidation of national peace and cohesion has not been met as conceived in the Agreement for National Unity. When a government meets to review an agreement in absence of the party to the agreement, is in itself telling. The tripartite committee recommendations. As we all know, at the end of its work, the tripartite committee came up with recommendations. 20 months Since the Tripartite Committee report was submitted to the President on 1st July 2024, the government has derailed and stalled implementation through deliberate delays, refusal to engage, and bypassing crucial timelines. We recall with appreciation the joint assessment mission of our international moral guarantors, concluded on the 14th and 15th October 2024, co-led by His Excellency Fatoumata Jallow Tambajan and His Excellency Leonardo Santos Simao of the United Nations. The mission aimed to review the schedule of the implementation of the Tripartite Committee recommendations and the shared commitment of all parties to safeguarding Sierra Leone's democratic stability. Regrettably, since that engagement, the implementation process has been marked by persistent delays, lack of transparency, and unilateral action by the government that undermine the collaborative spirit envisaged under the Agreement for National Unity. Several formal communications from the APC remain unanswered. Key commitments relating to legislative reforms and oversight mechanisms are outstanding or taken out of context in the proposed constitutional and legal reforms. An essential documentation necessary for meaningful participation has not been provided. Now, implementation of the roadmap, which has been abandoned by the government of Sierra Leone. The roadmap developed by the support secretariat of the Tripartite Committee was abandoned by the government immediately the report was presented to the President. The roadmap clearly provided a bipartisan approach to implementation. Instead, the government went ahead to appoint a steering committee dominated by its own institutions, including 9 ministers of cabinet, with only 3 APC persons appointed by government without consultation with the APC party. You might want to know that the steering committee chaired by the government chief negotiator is dysfunctional. Meetings are irregular. Minutes are not provided. And in summary, the committee is not fit for purpose. In all this, the government has been non-responsive. The government chief negotiator has refused to engage since the first meeting with his APC counterpart on 10th October 2025, and all action points remain outstanding, including his refusal to acknowledge receipt and respond to the correspondence from his counterpart. And when I say counterpart, I mean Dr. Kelfala Mara. The support secretariat established to aid the steering committee is also non-responsive to mails from the APC. Additionally, His Excellency President Marabio has also refused to meet with the leadership of the All People's Congress to listen to our concerns. Key recommendations have been ignored, delayed, and taken out of context. The following are noted. 1. Failure of the Parliament to act. Recommendation 20 of the tripartite recommendations, which calls for the setting up of a standing committee in Parliament to provide oversight on the ECSL and all electoral matters has been disregarded by the Speaker of Parliament, who ignored a formal request from the APC minority leader, Honorable Abdul Kabir, in Parliament to set up the committee. 2. The 2026 census will be a fraud. Government has delayed the 2025 decennial census, contrary to recommendation 38, in order to bypass the 2-year timeline for the use of the census data for purposes of elections. The APC has taken a position on this important breach of trust by the government and calls for both sides to discuss and agree a workable solution to the impasse. 3. Imposition of proportional representation. During the tripartite committee proceedings, both the APC and government couldn't agree on a preferred electoral system for the country. The APC wanted continuity of the first past the post, while the government opted for proportional representation. As a result of the standoff, the parties referred the matter to be decided by the electorate through national consultations as contained in recommendation 78. Sadly, the government manipulated the consultation process and provided for a PR system in the constitutional reform bill against the wish of the citizen. 58% of civil society and a majority of the paramount chiefs and religious bodies favored and support the first past the post form of elections. 4. The ECSL, which is central to many of these recommendations, is also not responsive. The ECSL has refused to uphold minutes of the Political Parties Liaison Committee (PPLC) meetings and actions on its website for transparent electoral process in accordance with recommendation 42. It has failed to implement the recommendation that the 2 largest political parties to serve as co-chair of the PPLC. The ECSL has also delayed the validation of key technical studies supported by the development partners on voter registration, election result management, and related policies. This is a blatant subversion of the reform process. 5. We wish to draw your attention to the fact that the recommendations of the tripartite committee explicitly call for a transparent, exclusive, and comprehensive management and functional review of the electoral management bodies, which the objective of addressing the institutional and administrative deficiencies within these bodies. This process was further intended to rectify the skewed staff directives and operational practices that created a conducive environment for the widespread institutional manipulation and that characterized the 2023 elections. We are, however, appalled that this critical process was conducted without the involvement of the APC party, and that its outcome has failed to adequately address the concerns we have consistently raised. 6. We met with the National Civil Registration Authority and learned that the authority has registered more than 95% of citizens. We welcome this progress, noting that the electoral data will be drawn from the civil register. We demand that the data is published and validated by all stakeholders immediately for transparency. 7, concerns surrounding electoral security. Since the Tripartite Committee report was presented in July 2024, the APC has not received details on the reforms said to have been undertaken by the elections management bodies, in particular the security sector. The APC notes with grave concern the lack of transparent reforms in the sector. It's a blatant attempt to replay the 2023 security lapses that deprived the APC from fielding in polling agents in the southeast of the country. Now, let us look at a very critical aspect, that is the constitutional and legal reforms. We firmly reject provisions in the constitutional amendment bill that grant the president power to appoint members to the search and nominating committee for electoral commissioners and the chair of the political party registration commission. This directly contravenes Tripartite Committee recommendation 36, which aims for an independent and impartial appointment process. The APC notes that the reduction in the 55% threshold for winning the presidential election to a simple majority, coupled with the introduction of 20% of vote in at least 2/3 of the districts in Sierra Leone, is a major deviation from the related tripartite recommendation of 50% plus 1 and 25% of the vote in at least 50% of the districts. Additionally, the APC is of the opinion that the introduction of the minimum district vote will increase polarization and encourage elections-related violence and victimization of citizens in districts to prevent the achievement of the 20% vote. The APC therefore rejects the change in the threshold for winning the presidential election. It should remain at 55% because of the present bad faith of the government in implementing the recommendations. We want the present constitutional, that is the 1991 constitution, threshold of 55% to remain. Now, you may want to know, what has the APC done so far? And that leads us to the steps taken by the APC to save the reform process. They've taken several steps. The APC is a responsible opposition and has worked the talk since the 2023 elections were stolen. We have documented the lapses of the government for our development partners in a position paper presented on 18th November 2025. Building on that diplomatic outreach, we have recently engaged our moral guarantors, reiterating our grave concerns. For those of you who may want to know about the position paper, you will contact the desk of the National Publicity Center. Now, we're going to talk about the elephant in the room. And that is the appointment of Edmond Sylvester Alpha. Of particular concern is the recent appointment of Mr. Edmond Sylvester Alpha as Chief Electoral Commissioner. For the 2023 discredited elections, Mr. Edmond Alpha was Regional Commissioner South and part of the team that we demand must go have been to money. This action by the President is inconsistent with recommendation 36 of the Tripartite Committee resolutions, which calls for the establishment of an independent search and nominating committee to vet and recommend qualified candidates to His Excellency the President for appointment as Electoral Commissioner for Sierra Leone. In consequence, the APC has withdrawn participation of APC elected officials in Parliament and local councils until Mr. Edmond Alpha, who is an accomplice to the 2023 discredited election, leaves office. It is evident from this account that the government of President Julius Maada Bio has not engaged with the APC in good faith. The government's actions suggest a concerted effort to subvert genuine reform and manipulate the electoral process ahead of the 2028 elections. At this juncture, we would like the media to note that as an opposition party, beyond electoral reforms, we have on record the dismal failure of the government. Since 2023, the country has witnessed continuing rise of state capture of institutions, persistent undermining of human rights and democracy, the harassment and intimidation of political opponents and ordinary citizens, and the failure to manage the economy, thus giving rise to hikes in fuel price and making life unbearable for the youth, women, the vulnerable, and ordinary Okada and Keke riders. As of today, fuel price per liter is 32,000. We don't know what will happen tomorrow. But that is really killing the economy and killing the citizens of this country. Because when fuel goes up, every other prices will spike high and people will suffer. We believe, therefore, as an opposition party, our call should go beyond asking for the restoration of fair play. And we must equally hold the government to account for its bad governance, without losing focus on the key issues at hand. We demand: 1, the immediate restructuring of the steering committee through the establishment of a high-level oversight body, co-chaired by the APC and the government, to provide genuine strategic direction on implementing both the Agreement for National Unity and the Tripartite Committee recommendation. 2, the immediate restructuring of the support secretariat to ensure a balanced, transparent, and inclusive workforce. 3, full transparency, requiring that the implementation tracker, minutes, and all relevant documents be made accessible to all stakeholders, including our moral guarantors, to enable independent monitoring. 4, we restate our position and urgently call on our development partners to facilitate an immediate joint review meeting between the APC and the government to address these critical concerns. In view of these firm positions, we conclude as follows: the APC will not return its elected officials to Parliament and local council until Mr. Edmond Alpha, who is an accomplice to the 2023 discredited elections, leaves office and the government demonstrates credible commitment to the implementation of the Agreement for National Unity and the Tripartite Committee recommendations. Should the government choose to disregard our legitimate concerns, the APC will stage a nationwide peaceful demonstration at a date to be announced by the leadership shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, the press, let it be clearly understood. The All People's Congress will not lend legitimacy to a broken process, nor will we participate in a system that is being deliberately manipulated to predetermine the will of the people. Our position is principled, lawful, and anchored in our duty to defend democracy. We will continue to pursue all constitutional, lawful, and peaceful means to ensure that the voice of the Sierra Leonean people is neither suppressed nor subverted. We therefore, as I've said earlier, serve this notice both to the government and to the international community that the responsibility for the collapse of this process rests squarely on the shoulders of government who have chosen unilateralism over dialogue and manipulation over reform. The APC remains ready, willing, and committed to genuine engagement, but only on the basis of good faith, transparency, and mutual respect for the rule of law. Should these conditions continue to be ignored, we will not hesitate to escalate, as I stated earlier, our lawful and peaceful actions to defend the democratic rights of our people. History will judge this moment, and we are determined to stand on the right side of history. And we are determined to stand for the people of this country. Be you APC or whatever political party you belong to, we are ready to stand for you, and we are ready to stand for your rights. We thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, National Secretary General. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, you've heard our position. You heard first from our acting chairman, and now the Secretary General, who has articulated the position of the APC. We will now have questions from you, and then our panelists will answer. We will take first 5 questions, and then thereafter we'll take the second batch, and then we will end this press conference. Just state your name, your media house, and then you ask your question. Let us avoid preambles, and please do not repeat the question. If someone has already asked a particular question and it has been answered, let somebody else go and ask the same question. Thank you very much.
My name is Saidu Bibia, and that's for exclusive. What's your take on remarks made by some of the officials that the tripartite agreement is a gentleman's agreement? What's your take on that statement? And I want to know the 4 divergent concerns that he has. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Reginald Brian Sawyer, and I work for Epic Radio. I have a few questions, and I would like the first one to Dr. Devarama, who is the coach of the tripartite committee. Doctor, can you clearly state the specific recommendation from the tripartite report that have been implemented so far, and what timeline exists for the remaining ones? That is the first one. And second, many citizens are still unclear about the practical impact of the agreement for national unity. How exactly is this agreement improving political cooperation and governance in Sierra Leone? Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm Dennis Fraser. I report for the National Broadcaster, the SABC. A question I want to ask is, I want to promise on 2 points mentioned by the National Secretary General. He spoke about the collapse of the process for the agreement on national unity. At what point of the recommendations do you sense collapse? Because according to the chair for the steering committee, he has informed members of the press and of course the public that the 8 resolutions of the ANC are fully implemented. And that was also broadcast by boycotts, a member of the steering committee. And also my final question will be, how far, in fact, as a party, are you really satisfied with the level of engagement you've been doing with the government on national issues? Thank you very much.
Good day, I am Arnold, a reporter and producer for Answer for Radio. Of course, we heard of the 80 recommendations being presented, but I also want to ask, how many of these recommendations have been implemented, and which are those of the recommendations that are still pending?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ekpala from Truth Media. So now, recommendations in the tripartite committee, according to the leader of government business in Parliament, he outright said they do not have any force of law. That if the implementations are not carried out, these are the legal implications. So now, while at the steering committee, was there a gentleman's agreement that followed stern warning if these recommendations were not adhered to, were not implemented?
Thank you so much. Is it Sawyer?
Yes.
Sawyer from Epi?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I want to take the first one. My colleagues will come in. You made mention that on the other side, the agreement was perceived to be a gentleman's agreement. And what really is our take on that? And you also said that you want to know what our concerns are regarding the arrival of the court. Correct? Okay. Gentleman's agreement doesn't come to play on matters of national concern that has to do with our democracy, our elections, and the will of people. So, it is a general principle globally that when a government signs an agreement, that agreement should be ratified. It's a general principle.
it behoves the government of Sierra Leone to ensure that those steps are taken. But whether those steps are taken or not, when a government enters into two agreements, it is the agreement for national unity and the tripartite committee recommendation, then it becomes one that behoves government to act in good faith. So what does it tell you about government? So you sign an agreement with an opposition party, witnessed by moral guarantors and development partners. You undermine that process and then jump on the other side and say it was a gentleman's agreement. Is that how government should behave? It makes no sense. A colleague of mine reminded me recently that when the Lome agreement was entered into, it was the government of the day that brought it to Parliament. I wouldn't bore you with this. I have a minority leader here in Parliament and my colleague lawyers who will speak to the nitty-gritties of this. But I do believe that it's a general principle globally that when a government signs an agreement, that agreement ought to be implemented. Should someone walk on the other side and say, no, it was a gentleman's agreement, then that certainly doesn't meet the spirit of governance. It is deceit, the highest level. It's wrong. And all of you in this room know exactly what I'm talking about. That is out of place, it is out of sync, and it defeats the purpose of national cohesion. There are many divergent issues that were raised in our report as an opposition party. But there are a few critical things I would like to speak to. First was that we demand again and again that the disaggregated results are produced. We never moved our position on that. We believe it was the right thing to do, that there was every reason to stand by the people of Sierra Leone so they know exactly what transpired when they entered that polling booth to vote. Second, for all those officials associated with the rigged elections of 2023, in our view, should be removed from office. I'll speak to those two. I'll speak to the next question and I will ask my colleagues to step in. He says, and this is Epic Radio, Mr. Sawyer, you want to know exactly progress that has been made under the tripartite committee, correct?
Yes, sir.
When you had the National Secretary General, we believe, as an opposition party, that disclosure is good, that we have to be transparent going forward. No single, you can quote me on this, no key single recommendation under the tripartite committee has been effectively concluded. So if, for example, a development partner provides expert support to do a review, for example, on policies, or to do a study on how elections results should be tallied across the country, as well as what we do next as far as voter registration is concerned, that, in our view, is somewhat being done under a particular recommendation. Now, if you, as a government, fail to bring all the parties around the table to validate those reports, to ensure that the recommendations of the experts are implemented, how will you wake up one morning and say those recommendations have been implemented? No. So for every recommendation, there are steps to be taken. That was why we were very clear from the outset that both of us, that is APC and government, sat around the table to agree on what the national unity agreement was, as well as the tripartite recommendations, and that both sides should join hands to ensure that we jointly implement. But where it is you decide to do things your own way and set aside whatever views and opinions and even the participation of the opposition, and then you wake up one morning and say you've implemented X, Y, and Z, that certainly will not be accepted, not by you or anyone in this room, because it defeats the purpose. So no, there is no single recommendation that has been effectively concluded. For recommendations where experts have to do what some have done, but they've not been validated. So if, for example, the Speaker of Parliament fails to set up a committee, that certainly will not be one that has been implemented. And if government manipulates the implementation of a certain recommendation and argues that, yes, we've ingrained this in the constitutional reform bill and therefore it is concluded, it's really not been concluded, because what he did was to take things out of context, as we recommended, and then he tabled it in Parliament and run to the public and say it's been implemented. So for sure, and in summary, there is no single recommendation in the Tripartite Committee that has been effectively implemented and concluded to the letter. I thank you. So I'll allow my colleagues to go.
Thank you very much. I believe it's the reporter from Exclusive that asked about the agreement being an informal agreement. I'll just buttress what my comrade Dr. Maya said. Whosoever said that should go back and look at the meaning of what an informal agreement is. But for proper edification, an informal agreement is a gentleman's agreement is an informal agreement. It is usually unwritten and it is based on trust. What we did when we signed tripartite and the agreement for national unity, it is something that is intended to be legally enforceable. It is something that is intended to be seen through. You know, you look at the parties. There were negotiations first, after which a draft was made, which was signed by both parties. And we had international partners that superintended that particular negotiation and signing of that agreement. Beyond that, they did put together a team that will be monitoring whether or not that agreement has been complied with. That is not a gentleman's agreement. It is a formal agreement. It is an agreement that is intended to hold this country together. It is because of the same attitude of not following the rule of law that brought us to this point where we are today. Firstly, to have a tripartite agreement, and secondly, for us to activate level 1, which is the boycott of governance, and we're here today telling you about further steps. They are saying that it was not taken to Parliament. It is the leader of government business that introduces such agreements in Parliament to become law. If he has abdicated his responsibility, let him not come and blame APC party that is not in charge of government business in Parliament for that particular abysmal failure. President Bill just came yesterday after Guinea has basically taken over Yenga over years, and recently they went to Palabar and attempted taking over another village. He came yesterday waving a piece of paper. Does he expect that piece of paper to be a gentleman's agreement and that Dili should not comply with it to give us back Yenga? Let us be serious about these issues. These are issues that are impacting the lives of people. These are issues that are impacting the security of this country. For us in the APC, we will not sit by and see the country going down the drains. We will not sit back. So if anyone thinks this is a gentleman's agreement, then they are making a very big mistake. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me start by addressing this issue about the CM saying he has implemented all the chapter committee recommendations. On the 12th of March, the Secretariat for the Implementation Chapter Committee published a report. In their own words, they said 9% not started. And these are recommendations 5, 19, 20, and 61 on ECSL. Recommendation 29 on Human Rights Commission, and the recommendations 15 and 22 on NCRA, in their own words. They said 52% are ongoing. And these are recommendations 4, 9, 11, 14, 16, 21, 31, 32, 33, 37, 41, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 49, 50, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 79. Their own words. These are ongoing. He said 27% are partially completed. These are 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 13, 18, 32, 34, 35, 36, 38, 39, 46, 47. And they said 10% completed in their own words. And these are 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 8. And they said 2% not applicable. And these are 70 and 71. So if in their own report, only 10% have been completed, how can you as Chief Minister go on air to say you have implemented all the recommendations? This speaks volumes about the integrity of some people holding high office. This speaks volume about the lack of sincerity, honesty, and transparency on the part of this government. And this speaks volumes about their inability to be honest with the people of Sierra Leone. Now, let me talk about this whole issue about gentleman's agreement or gentleman's agreement. The lawyers have spoken. I'm not a lawyer. But the spirit that took us to Bintumani and that took us around the hotels in Freetown for almost 7 months was based on an understanding that all parties were sincere and committed to the process. Had it not been for that, we wouldn't be where we are. Because APC had taken a position. That is why this time we will not take any gentleman's agreement again. But let us say this. Any agreement that a government enters into with any party, that agreement is automatically binding on the government to implement. Government is not just one ordinary citizen. If you go and sign on behalf of government, whether it is ratified or not, that agreement is binding. because you are committing that government, and I'm sure before you sign, you must have the requisite authority to sign on behalf of government. Now let me draw a parallel. In 1999, Sierra Leone and Sierra Leoneans went to Lomé. They signed the Lomé Peace Agreement. When they returned from Lomé, the then Attorney General and Minister of Justice took the agreement to Cabinet, and they got Cabinet to approve it. And like every other document you take to Cabinet, after Cabinet approval, colleague former ministers will tell you that document goes to the Law Officers Department for legal drafting. It is not the minister that takes it to law officers. As long as Cabinet has passed it, the Law Officers Department now takes it on to do the legal drafting before it becomes a bill that then goes to Parliament. Because a minister does not draft a bill. It has to be drafted by the Attorney General. That is why you need the concurrence of the Attorney General before even that paper passes in Cabinet. So the 1999 agreement went to Cabinet and it was passed. Then the Aegis Office, law officers, did the legal drafting and then took the bill to Parliament, which was passed. In this case, we signed the agreement, they took it to Cabinet, it passed. So just so you know, the agreement passed Cabinet. I hope they are not suggesting that decisions taken by their Cabinet mean nothing. Because if Cabinet spends the country's resources to sit on a document and they adopt it, they approve it, it means it's legally binding. It was now up to the Attorney General to take it through Law Officers Department for legal drafting, for it to then go to Parliament for ratification. They failed to do so, I'm sure, for obvious reasons. Because they want to come back and expose their incompetence and their inability to obey what they have agreed to. So to now turn around and blame the APC is very wrong. And it is my understanding that our representatives in Parliament try to push the SLPP to lay the agreements in Parliament for ratification. And that is how the unfortunate statement came about. So I think this is very, very wrong. And it just goes to reinforce the fact that SLPP in the first place was never sincere, was never committed, was never genuine. Somebody asked a question about the divergent views of the APC. The first thing about the APC is that as far as we are concerned, those elections were stolen. As far as we are concerned, the results as announced do not reflect how people voted. And that is why we did our analysis and we entered 71% of the results. When we entered 71% of the results based on the RRS that we had that we still have in our possession, APC had over 57% and SLPP Madabio had less than 42%. But that was for 71% of the results. There was a remaining 29%. So what we did was to project. So based upon the RF we have received, APC got 10% of the votes in a particular district. Then we will say we will project that under normal circumstances, APC will continue getting 10% on average in that district, since it was a district block system. After that, when we did that analysis, we ended up with a figure of 49% for APC and 48% for SLPP. So if then we created room for a margin of error plus or minus 3%, which is statistically representative. And that would make it a maximum of 52% for APC and a maximum of 51%, 49%, no, 48, 51% for SNPP maximum. That is if they had plus 3%, so they are 48%, to become 51%. And this is actually consistent with the report of NEW, which said no party, none of the candidates was able to get the 55%, which is required for you to say you have won on the first ballot. So therefore, we then, as APC said, if this is the case, then let's go back to the polls. Since the onus to produce the results is not vested in APC, but in those that conducted the results, ECSM. And if you even go back to the results they published on the 26th and the 27th, that statement, you will see on one of the bullet points that they promised that they will publish the disaggregated results by station on their website. They did not. The reason is simple. Because they knew that the figures that they have announced do not reflect the reality. And in fact, we all know that surveying of results was still ongoing in Podloko, still ongoing in McKinney, still ongoing in Wellington when they were announcing results. And the procedure that should have been followed is that the results should have been collated at the district level, certified, then they go to the region, certified before going to the national for final certification before announcement. We agreed to skip the district for the region with the assurances that at that level there will be transparency, they will use projectors to project. They refused to do that. So we then said, if this is the case, and since you have failed to produce the results which you were to produce, and we have results with the RRS which are credible and show that you have not won, then we should go back to the polls to determine the actual winners. We went further to say we should not encourage impunity in this country. When somebody allows an election to be rigged in that way, and you are a key player in that process, there should be penalties. And so we said all the commissioners and the directors that were directly responsible for this anomaly should go. They should face, they should go, and there should be a complete restructuring of ECSL and the other electoral management bodies. Because what happened in 2023 is a clear case of institutional rigging. They all got together and we say, no, go announce. Then finally they withdraw, say, we read them. They give the paper, we read. All of us saw them at Betumani with soldiers behind them. And they started, and we also how many bottles of water Colonel drank that day. I'm not sure he was himself in a very good state when he was reading that announcement, making that announcement. So, in our own divergent views, we made it clear that we do not agree with the results and that we should go back to the polls and that there should be consequences for those that bore greatest responsibility for those crimes. And the guy from Reginald from Epic wanted to know what the likely effect of this will have been. The whole idea behind the agreement for national unity was to address the polarity, the divisions that have taken place in this country. I think in the aftermath of the 2023 elections, tensions had gone to such a level that everybody was concerned that this could degenerate. to anything. And so there was a desire to ensure that whatever could have happened is bad is nipped in the bud and we have the reversal. And it was because of our interest as a party to put country above our own party's interests that we agreed to go to Bin Mali. And we made the false assumption that the other side was acting in good faith. In hindsight, we have known that they were not. And their pronouncements just go to confirm that. So yes, our intention was that the agreement would foster unity. And if you look at the 8 recommendations, you will see that we even made recommendations bordering on the need for both sides to be meeting and exchanging ideas so that we will help to build confidence and trust. And they, as a government, needed to take leadership. Several letters have gone from us to them urging action, and they have refused. And now, we're in a situation where things in our country are going from bad to worse. The people are suffering. Diesel is now 35,000 to a litre. And in another week or two, it will go beyond 40,000. And just imagine what that would mean for our suffering masses. Now they cannot even pay the police and the Mungu police, this, how do you call them? This SLRSA people. Okay, the traffic wardens. And so they have now allowed them to go and harass our keke riders, to go and harass our Okada riders, to go even and harass us on the streets, just to make money for their survival. We as a party are not only interested in our parties and interests, we are also interested in the welfare of our people in this country. So part of the reason why we have proposed a nationwide peaceful demonstration will also include a demonstration about the economic hardship this country is facing. Because we believe we have a responsibility to address that. Yesterday, I was at the correctional center. I visited Zainab Sharif. And I met some women. One woman was sentenced to 35 years in prison for smoking kush. 35 years in prison for smoking kush. I met her. I spoke with her. Others were sentenced for similar actions because they said they were caught selling kush. What they did not address is where these people got the kush from. So which means they did not attack the actual big guns that are responsible for bringing the drugs into this country. Rather, the ordinary women who were just battling for survival are the ones they went and sentenced for 35 years. It would have been very easy. The same way they caught the guys on the street smoking and they said, where did you buy it from? They said, I bought it from Lasana. You arrest Lasana, don't stop there. Ask Lasana, where did you get the drugs you are selling from? He will tell you, I got it from Payasane. And you will then get to the real one. But they are protecting the people who are actually responsible for these drugs coming to this country that has ruined this country and is continuing to ruin our future and the future of our youth in this country. And we all know the elephant in the room, where we've heard that this country is harboring an international drug lord. And because of that, Sierra Leoneans have been refused visas to go to America and other countries. Why do we have to suffer for a crime we did not commit? And reports from reliable sources also suggest that a senior government functionary was required to send 22 representatives for an international conference in America. Instead of sending 22 people from his institution, he sent 22 friends and relatives. They did not even go to the conference. And that is part of the reason why America decided to slam the ban on Sierra Leone. Because if such highly placed people can do such things and use their offices to get the government to issue visas, then they have lost confidence in the ability of these governments to be part of the international war against trafficking, war against illicit immigration and those type of things. So this is the situation where we are as a country. This is where we have found ourselves as a party, and we believe that any responsible party needs to stand up for the people. And APC as a grassroots party is taking the informed step to stand up for the people of this Sierra Leone. Thank you very much.
Colleagues on this side.
Thank you, ma'am. I'd like to continue bringing our focus back to this controversy about the extent to which both the tripartite recommendations and the Agreement for National Unity resolutions have been implemented. And it's important that we understand the difference between the two. Because when the percentages are being thrown around, sometimes people get confused. So the Agreement for National Unity had 8 resolutions. And if you look at the resolutions that were listed there, you will find that we have not met or satisfied 100%, as we are often told. And I will use this opportunity to just bring to our attention what those 8 resolutions were, because it's only 8, so we can look at them very quickly. The first of the resolutions was for the speech to be made by His Excellency the President, which focused on dialogue, unity, cohesion, and peace. That was the first. It was done. The second was for the APC. Irrespective of what we knew to be true, which other speakers have explained, that the results that were announced were not the results of the vote. Irrespective of that, Resolution 2 said the APC would return to governance. That was done. Now, Resolution 3, which is where the tripartite recommendations come in, was the creation of the tripartite committee. And very, very importantly, it says in respect of those recommendations that would look at the electoral processes, not only for 2023, but go back at the insistence of government. Because we came to the table, we said, 2023, we don't agree with what happened. They said, but we had problems as well in 2012, in 2007. We'll look at everything. We looked at everything. And the agreement, in the Agreement for National Unity, was that the recommendations from the tripartite committee would be actionable and implementable. So, where are we with the tripartite recommendations? Dr. Kelfala and Dr. Richard Conte began to answer because somebody said, which precisely have been done? Well, of the 80, 8, according to the Steering Committee Secretariat's own documents published on the 12th, 8 out of 80 have been concluded. And what are those 8? Well, 6 of them are in relation to the Integrated Electoral Security Planning Committee. So there's an Integrated Electoral Security Planning Committee which comprises of Sierra Leone Police, ONS, etc. 8 recommendations have been concluded. 6 are in relation to that quite obscure, when you think about it in the broader terms of things, set of recommendations. The 7th is about police training, and the 8th is the last one, recommendation 80, which says the tripartite recommendations will be taken to cabinet and it will be approved by cabinet. So when they say they've done 10%, it is 6 on internal security arrangements, police training, and taking it to cabinet. Now that makes you really, really think, How long does it take for us to implement the resolutions and the recommendations which are the heart of the matter? Well, I'd like you to know that in April 2025, this body, the All People's Congress Party, received a presentation from the Tripartite Secretariat led by Golo Carter. And he presented to us, among other recommendations, but particularly the ones of interest, the position of the ECSL recommendations. That was in April 2025, almost 1 year ago. In March 2026, we have received a presentation, and you can see that none of the recommendations have been concluded, except the 8 I just mentioned. That speaks to a lack of commitment. That speaks to a lack of good faith. That speaks to delays that are unnecessary and which also are reflected in the way that the steering committee of the tripartite works or doesn't work, because it has been dysfunctional. There are no meetings, minutes of meetings, there are no agendas. The meetings themselves do not give opportunities for the members to deal with the issues, which is why 1 year later, we still have none of the ECSL, none of the NACRA, none of the voter registration, results management, all the key recommendations have yet to be concluded. And then we come on, because we were on Resolution 3. So Resolution 3 isn't finished. I think we can all agree on that. The document from the government itself says that. You then have Resolution 4. Resolution 4 was about the release of prisoners, the conclusion of cases. We have political cases, such as my colleague, Yabong, chairperson of Tonkolili District Council. She is still on bail. Her case has not been resolved. She was also, as was I, convicted or not convicted, charged for disorderly behavior. We have COI cases where the files have gone missing. So Resolution 4 is not complete. Progress has been made. We acknowledge that. We don't deny it, but we must also acknowledge that it has not been completed. And then you come on to Resolution 5 and Resolution 6, which is about Resolution 5 is about the institutional inter-party dialogue. Yes, there is one, it's happening at PPRC, but Resolution 6 is about building the relationship and ensuring that we have better communication between the leaderships of the two parties. Well, that certainly has not happened, as you've heard from the statements. Resolution 7 was about insightful speech, and both parties made statements, so that was done. And then Resolution 8 was the moral guarantors being set up. So if you have 8 resolutions, 2, the biggest 2, Resolution 3, which is tripartite, Resolution 4, which is prisoners. If 2, the biggest 2, have not been concluded, then simple waiting tells you you cannot say that 80% of the ANU, or indeed 100%, as we've heard, have been concluded. So I just wanted to touch on those points. And as I conclude and hand over to other colleagues, I want us to be very clear that the process has been stalled. Where we were in April 2025 is pretty much where we still are in March 2026. When it comes to the question of the ANU being 100% complete, if the biggest resolutions, the weightiest resolutions are not making progress, you cannot say that it is complete. And finally, when we talk about the position of the APC, as others have said, our considerations are not just for ourselves as a party. They are for democracy in Sierra Leone. And on that note, when it comes to the appointment of the Electoral Commissioner, I'll remind us all that in December of this year, Afrobarometer published a survey which showed that trust in the Electoral Commission that was being led by Edmund Alpha as the acting Electoral Commissioner, Chief Electoral Commissioner, trust in that institution was at an all-time low. it had fallen from 64% of the citizens of this country saying they trusted the institution in 2018 to only 34% saying they trust the institution in December 2025. Not surprisingly, when you have a situation where the person leading that institution was known to be part of the rigging that was done in Koinadugu district in the by-election, where 049 was changed to 149. Not surprising that trust will be eroded. So with those few words, we will say we will be moving out, standing up, speaking up for democracy in this country to be protected. For Kush, which has led to us collecting 247 bodies from the streets of Freetown as at October of last year, until we're told don't collect them anymore, until we're told that we don't have the numbers anymore. But I think we all know from the media reports that the bodies are still lying on the streets. The young people are still dying because the Kush crisis is still not being addressed effectively. Thank you.
Yes, I want to thank all those who have added their voices to responding to the questions asked. I am just going to deal with one issue. The question that has to do with the ratification of the agreement for national unity. Of course, the Constitution is clear. If you read subsection 4 of section 40D, it gives the president the right to enter into treaties, to go into agreement, to go into convention on behalf of Sierra Leone. But with a proviso. If you go on to reading the provision is very, very clear. It says, once those agreements have two implications. One, it has to do with funding, using the fund of the state to accomplish the agreement. Second, it has legal issues, like for example, freeing of prisoners. It has legal implication. So when president or government enters into an agreement on and behalf of the people of Sierra Leone, and those agreements are related to expending the revenue of our nation or dealing with any issue that is legal, it is incumbent on government to ensure that those agreements are ratified. It is against the Constitution for government to implement any agreement that they have signed to, they have appended their signature to, without it being ratified by government. So it shows clearly that the onus of ratification is on government. Government went into the agreement as provided for in the Constitution, and the onus of ratification of this agreement is on government. Government cannot go into any agreement with any other person or any other state on and on behalf of the people of Sierra Leone without ratifying that agreement before its implementation. So for the fact that the agreement of national unity has been implemented, government has taken steps to implement it without going to parliament, it means that government has expressly gone against the Constitution. It's beyond step. It's their responsibility. So anybody who questions the opposition, that why didn't the opposition ensure that this agreement is that it is not the responsibility of the opposition, it's the responsibility of government. And if government doesn't do it, it means government has gone against its own Constitution. It is clear. Read the proviso in subsection 4 subsection 4 of section 40. It's very clear. And also, we have made frantic efforts to ensure that the content of the agreement, the recommendations, especially recommendation 20, which states that a parliamentary committee that has oversight over all elections management body must be established in parliament. I have written series of letters, copies of those letters are with the secretariat, and I forwarded a copy to Dr. Mara. And you just see government's unwillingness. So to me, I am clearly and authoritatively saying that government has gone against the Constitution of the state by appending their signature on an agreement and begin to implement the agreement without ratifying the agreement. It's government's responsibility, and government must own up to ensure that they ratify this agreement as soon as possible, because they have appended their signature to it. Nobody forced government to do it. It did it on behalf of the state, and government has the right to go into an agreement on behalf of the state. And there are people who are saying, because this agreement has not been ratified, so government has the right to go against the agreement or to appoint Edmond Alpha. Let me also attempt to lay that to rest. It depends on government's willingness. If government is not sincere, if government is not willing, they will always go against agreement. And to me, it's a slap on our face for the government of Sierra Leone to enter into an agreement on behalf of all the people of this country, and they are going against the agreement expressly. It's a slap on our nation as Sierra Leone, and government doesn't have the right to do this. So to me, I want to make this very clear, that ratification of this document is on the government of Sierra Leone. And the mere fact that government has begun to implementing content of this agreement without ratifying it, it means government has gone against its own constitution. So what will be good for government is for them to expeditiously ensure that this document is taken to parliament, it is ratified, so that we through with it. So that is the only thing that I'm going to add.
Okay.
I don't know if we still have a few questions. Because I believe even the unasked questions have been answered. But again, if we do, we'll take 2 or 3 more. But I honestly believe that we can do interviews. And let me also state here that all of us here are available for appearances on your media houses on invitation, of course. We are available. Panelists, those of us who have been engaging you regularly, we are all here. I want to, on behalf of the leadership, express our sincere gratitude to you, members of the Fourth Estate. We are now at a point where we need to stand up for this country. Just a few months ago, we saw institutions displaying properties of people who they believe stole from government offices. When you start that, you don't just limit it to the junior workers. It has to be extended to even the appointed offices, because we are seeing people building houses all over the place, in Freetown and the provinces. But that is not just it. I'm just reading on social media that there is an investigation about an ultrasound being stolen from the hospital. We've heard of generators being stolen from medical institutions. It's all like they want to wait for them and them and they see other with offices. Say they run government. But that is the state we find ourselves in as a country. Let me express our gratitude to you, members of the Fourth Estate. We hope you've received enough information today that you can help us disseminate. And it is interesting, that when we were hunting ghost workers in schools, those teachers were being laughed at. But we have 18 ghost workers, according to audit reports, I believe, and the office of the Chief Minister. It actually cost this country about 12 billion gold days. This is serious. When you read successive audit reports since 2018, you will understand why we take these things very seriously, because the amount of money that we are losing to some of these criminal behaviors or these criminal acts of misappropriation that we see in respective offices, they are not only disturbing, they are cause for alarm, because the level at which we are seeing public theft, public mismanagement, misappropriation, it is alarming, especially where we cannot even afford to disburse funds to local councils, where we cannot even afford to pay salaries for our military, our police, our public officers on time. Sometimes they go months before they receive their salaries. We thank you very much for coming. Special thanks to AYD, Truth Media, and Liberty Online TV for airing this live. I know many of you asked to cover it live, but of course, we have to be, we have to work within, our limits. Sierra Network, thank you very much. I know you also have this live. We thank you for your continued support. Thank you to all the media houses, print, electronic, online platforms. We appreciate you all, and we ask that we continue this good working relationship that we have started. We are here and we are in this together. It is only when we work collaboratively that we will make this country better for all of us. Thank you very much. Eid Mubarak in advance. I understand we pray tomorrow. Eid Mubarak, Ramadan Mubarak, Happy Lent. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God Almighty, accept our prayers, and may He continue to expose them away for the Pademba Road, based on our office.
For the news with the around, log into Liberty TV online. Positively we bring the change. They get the masses involved. Staffs them everywhere. We climb the mountain just to get the news. We go down the slums to get the views. Hi, yeah, hey. Voices come. Credibility, now we are building news, give you the views, the tell where you want them. Government issues, democracy, now we not the answer. We human them, God picking, let's get the power. He count on me, he count on me anyhow. Give you the news, give you the views, the tell where you want them. Government issues, democracy, now we not the answer. Human them, God begin the security power. You can call on me, count on me anyhow. Liberty we ride, like a nigga we fly. Liberty TV day before. Climb the mountain just to get the news. Go down the slums to get the views. Hi, yeah. Voices come. Hi, yeah. Give you the news, give you the views, the tell where you want them. Government issues, democracy, now we not the answer. We human them, God picking, let's get the power. He count on me, he count on me anyhow. Give the news, give the views, the tell where you want them. Government issues, democracy, now we not the answer. Human them, God begin the second power. You call me, come to me anyhow. Speak free and fearless, inclusive journalism. Speak free and fearless, inclusive